Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September meeting of the Queens Parent Advisory Board. My name is Sharon Lee. I serve as the acting Queensborough president. We'll just jump right into it. It's a topic that is on everyone's minds, 30 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the room, as you can see, we are joined by, of course, we've got Executive Superintendent Mabel Muniz-Sarduy of North. Welcome back, Executive Superintendent. We are also joined by our new Executive Superintendent of South, Queens South, Dr. Mauriciere de Govia. Welcome, Dr. de Govia. Lovely to see you. We were originally scheduled to be joined by Deputy Chancellor, DOE Deputy Chancellor Adrienne Adams. We were informed very last minute that she is unable to join us. So in her stead will be Ms. Nadia Chadha, Senior Director of Strategic Affairs for the Office of Student Enrollment at the NYC Department of Education. Just saying your title, I had to take 2 breaths, and not because I am I'm not in the best shape during the pandemic. Ms. Chadha, welcome. Nice to meet you. We are hopeful that this session will be able to grant at least a lot more clarity, any little bit of clarity, any little bit of predictability and planning for our families in Queens is appreciated and much needed, much needed. I think we were earlier, we had in the room earlier my appointee to the New York City Panel for Education Policy, Deborah Dillingham, but I know that she's kind of double dutching this meeting and the PEP meeting that is happening simultaneously. So I think she'll duck in when she can. Also in the room on your screen, everyone here probably knows, I see Deb Dillingham, welcome back. I see Monica Gutierrez, my education director. And so for folks who are just logging on, we're going to first hear from our officials from the Department of Education, New York City Department of Education, and then we'll have an interactive Q&A. While you are listening to the presentations, we ask that you funnel your questions. If you have them already, go on ahead and put them in, but funnel your questions into the Q&A portion of the webinar. And so once we hear from our officials first, when we engage in the Q&A, my team will help facilitate the Q&A. Before we begin, I just want to put in a plug because I must, we must. If you haven't already, for folks who are tuning in, if you have not already, I ask you to please fill out your census, my2020census.gov. It takes 10 minutes. It will determine our next 10 years. And so I ask that you do it tonight if you haven't already. And so with that, I'd like to open the floor to, of course, Ms. Chadha. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today. I'm actually going to pass it over to Alon, or our executive superintendents, who are going to represent the DOE. I'm here more today to talk about any enrollment questions or admissions questions that come up.
Okay. All right.
We can't hear Mabel.
All right, Ms. Muniz-Sarduy, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Of Queens North, Executive Superintendent, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Borough President Lee. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I want to thank all the parents and families who are listening in, and I hope that your families are well during this unpredictable year. And I know that you have many questions, and we will answer, my colleague and I will answer as many questions as we can and that we know of in this unpredictable time. As the Borough President shared, I am the Executive Superintendent for Queens North. I've been with Queens North, this is my 10th month with Queens North, and prior to that, I was in District 28 in Queens South for 4 years as superintendent. I have in Queens North 169 schools, They vary from pre-K to 12th grade. We have a total of 146,000 students in pre-K to 12. In K to 8, we have 110,000, and in our high schools in Queens North is 36,000 students. Queens North comprises of District 24, District 25, District 26, District 30, and the high schools in those 4 districts. We have 16% of our students who are multilingual learners, and 17% of our students who are special needs students. Our top 5 languages in Queens North comprise of 60% Spanish, 21% Chinese, 4% Bengali, 3% Arabic, and 2% Korean. So we definitely are at the hub of all, and there's 79 languages in Queens North. This is just a top 5. I wanted to share the models, the different models that the schools, the districts selected based on parent input and staff input. In District 24, the most popular model was Model 2, which comprises of 2 days in-person learning and 3 days, and they alternate days for blended learning. In District 25, the popular model was for them was a 50-50 model, half of the time at the school and half of the time at home. Blended learning, 51% chose the 1A. And in District 26, the popular model was also Model 2, which is a third of the time in different days of the week going to school. In District 30, Model 2 was the most popular. And in the high schools, we have the most popular was 3D, which is a 6-day rotation time frame for students to go to school. And then in the high schools, we had a couple of exemptions that schools created their own models within the high schools. As you know, we have remote as well as blended instruction in our schools, and it was based on families' preferences. Please make sure quarterly we will have an opportunity for parents to opt into blended learning. At any time, parents can opt to remote. Please make sure that you create a New York City account to ensure that you have the attendance of your child, your grades, transportation, reading scores, assessment scores, and progress towards graduation. So if you are not familiar with the New York City Schools account, please reach out to your local school. Your parent coordinators can give you that information. Of course, our children will be having art in person and or remote. It will look slightly different depending on the space that the schools have, but we will be having music and dance and theater and visual arts. The instruction will be modified, but it will be based on the standards of arts, and we will maintain a certified teacher in the arts. Our students who are multilingual learners, the children last year, this school year that just passed, did not get an assessment. So we are going by year 1920 for their levels of proficiency. And if a child received in 1920 services for a second language, they will continue to have services in their native language. And we will use those eligibility levels based on 1920. Schools will have 30 additional days to assess new arrivals of students who have a second language so that they are provided with the services that they need. And to remind you that we have free over the phone interpretation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and, and we have 350 languages. And you can have someone at your school, the parent coordinator, um, set this appointment up so that you can speak to the teacher or an administrator in any language that you need. Of course, also physical education is being done at schools, of course, very creatively. But all PE, we will follow all the regulations so that the children are either remotely or in blended learning, provided with extracurricular activities wherever possible. Outdoor space is recommended during PE, and some people have applied for outdoor space PE. During COVID times that we are in, health and safety is a priority, and in New York City, the mayor and the chancellor have created policies and protocols that are very, very strict, so that your children and staff members are safe. We are encouraging every staff member to get COVID tested, and that's going very well. And the staff will have priority, and they have certain sites that are available for staff. We have daily screening of staff as well as students and visitors to the school. That screening includes a paper questionnaire of four questions that has to do with the health and safety of the individual. The child as well as the staff member has to fill it out either prior to coming to school or on site. We have hard copies of those forms. And the questions are if you have symptoms of COVID, and it's a yes or a no. If you, in any of these four questions, if there's a yes, you will be asked to go home for the safety of yourself as well as others. We will have a health screening process beginning in October, and it will be random, and it'll be between 10 to 20% of the students who will be tested for COVID, as well as staff members. All students that will be tested are from grades 1st and up, and parents will have to provide consent for this. We also provided in Queens North an English, Spanish, and Chinese, the top 3 languages, a little video of how to complete the screening form so that you can do it at home that morning. It's only good for 24 hours, so you have to do it every 24 hours because it talks about if you have a fever, have you been exposed, have you traveled, or has someone in your family had symptoms of COVID. So that has to be filled out every single day because every single day our health can change. That's why this is so unpredictable. And this is why we have changes on a daily basis. The chancellor has launched a situation room. It began September 14th and is open 6 of the 7 days of the week. Saturdays it is closed, and it's open from 6:30 in the morning till 9 in the evening. And this is for a principal to call in, and it's like a one-stop handling of COVID cases. So if a principal hears from a staff member who is feeling sick, she will call or he will call that situation room. And in that situation room will be people from health, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. There will be DOE staff, and there will be a group of folks determining what people, if this person was exposed, and then track and trace. People will call the different people this person was around in order to ensure that people quarantine if they have to. So that really supports the principal in ensuring that their staff is safe so that children are safe. The cleaning of classrooms and buildings are done, enhanced cleaning with disinfectants of surfaces. And throughout the year, every single day, schools are cleaned and disinfected, and they have supplies to do that. They do deep cleaning on a nightly basis, and during the day, they do the surfaces like the doorknobs, the handrails, the places, the elevator buttons, the doors, places where people touch throughout the day. They're constantly cleaning, and at night they do their deep cleaning with electrostatic sprays in order to make sure that our schools are ready to open in the morning. I'm gonna, of course, we're gonna recommend that all children wear face coverings, staff members wear face coverings, and if you have to visit the school, please come by yourself, because we limit the people who are in the building so that everyone is safe. We also have different workshops, social emotional workshops that we are providing in Queens North. Yesterday, we had a wellness workshop for families in English, Spanish, and Chinese. I'll put up my website so that you can always look, because we're going to have a series of different workshops in October around how to help your child, continue to help your child cope with crisis during this pandemic. And these will be provided in 3 languages. We have the Learning Bridges program, which is a free childcare program for families. Priority will be given to families of temporary housing, including shelters and hotels, children of the New York City Department of Education, families who reside in NYCHA, children who are in foster care or social services, and students, children of families, teachers who are employed as well. They are in specific sites. In Queens North, we have 16 sites, 4 in District 24, 1 in 25, 3 in 26, and 8 in 30. They're not within the schools, but the children that go to those specific schools will have priorities in the priority that I mentioned before. Children will have breakfast and lunch in the school, which is a great thing, and an opportunity for all children to have their grab and go meals. Of course, with attendance, we will be tracking attendance, make sure that your children are both on synchronously and asynchronously, live or working on a project related to the live events that your children are doing, because this will help provide attendance for the teachers. I'm going to stop right there. I think I've talked enough, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague so she can add some things around Queens North. Dr. Mori, if you can.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, before you do that, thank you, Ms. Sarduy. If you're not done talking yet, there's going to be a lot of questions that we'll be leaning on you and Dr. Govia to answer. Next, we have Dr. Mauriciere de Govia. Govia, excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
De Govia. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is your first Queens Parent Advisory Board meeting, I understand.
I met with the high school parents last week, so I've been on a roll of community meetings.
It's the first Queens President's Parent Advisory Board meeting.
Yes.
We can be a feisty bunch, sometimes feistier in person, but I understand that you just started not too long ago.
A little over a month ago, but it's been 25 years of working for the Department of Education.
But in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, my doctoral work is in crisis management and turnaround, so it's not lost on me why I get to be here at this time. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Borough President Lee, for the invite and the opportunity. As I was listening to Executive Superintendent Sarduy speak, I was thinking, we are one system. All of the pieces outside of the stats around Queens North, we're very much so in alignment with. So thank you again for the welcome. I'm Dr. Mauriciere de Govia, affectionately known as Dr. Mori. I am the new Executive Superintendent of Queens South. My prior roles within New York City, as I mentioned before, it's been April marked 25 years of being committed to this work. I've had the pleasure of being a principal of 2 schools. I've been a community superintendent in Brooklyn, and my last role was being executive director in Brooklyn South. So coming into this role during a pandemic, not lost on me with my crisis management background and my ability to help schools with it. They are very much so in a need for turnaround. This round with the pandemic, though, is something of epic proportions, as each and every one of us sitting in this room have never faced anything like this before. But trust and believe that not only do I come to you as an executive superintendent, I also come to you as a parent. I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and it has been quite an adventure managing school and work for them and making sure that learning is still taking place regardless of the circumstances under which we're under. So without being repetitive, just a little bit about, I want to get to the questions. Queens South, so who we are, so just so you know, we are comprised of districts 27, 28, and 29. We have about 148 schools. We just recently added some pre-K centers, so I think we're at about 7 pre-K centers. I'll have to confirm that number because that they were just recently added. We have about 99,000 students enrolled. About 48% of our students are female and 51% of our students are male. 22% are Asian, 35% are Hispanic. And 35% are Black, 27% are Hispanic. We have about 9.5% white, and 5.3% of students who make up other ethnic backgrounds. We service about 16% of our students have disabilities, and about 10% of our learners are English language learners. So within Queens South, just as within Queens North, throughout New York City, the push is around making sure that safety and health come first. So just one thing about in that category that I just want to reiterate that Executive Superintendent Sarduy talked about was the health screening. Parents, please be advised that every time your child is attending a public school or you have to go in for a meeting of some sort, the health screening piece must be done. So Executive Superintendent Sarduy talked about the paper piece. Within the paper piece, you're just answering the questions. If there's a section for your name, please be advised you do not have to put your name on the paper. That's a very important piece. I believe some of the documents may have gone out with a space for you to put your name down. You do not have to put your name down. All you have to do is just answer the questions to gain entry. There is also a link available for the health screening, and I find this very helpful as a parent especially. The link will give you an option to download it onto your phone. And Borough President Lee, we can make sure that you have that link so you can share it on your website so parents can easily just go in. So parents, you have the opportunity to either use the link on a daily basis or download it as an icon onto your phone. And what it basically does is ask the same questions that are on the paper screening, and you would show your green check that your child is free to go. For high school students, they may have their own devices that they're going into the buildings with, but that's a very important piece. We don't want our children's school day held up because they're outside having their temperature checked. Schools also have thermometers available to families. So if you don't have a thermometer, your school community thermometers were delivered to schools as a first round of the PPE supplies that were delivered. So you can request one if you need one. So that's not a headache for you to worry about, like, okay, where am I getting a thermometer from? The school should be able to provide you with one. Another area I didn't hear, Mabel, I don't think you talked about nurses. So I'm trying to fill out the gaps. So nurses there should be a nurse assigned to every school within New York City. If there's any issues with that, I would like, please alert me to that. I will leave my email address if you need to reach back out to me for anything. But every school should have a nurse at this point. And note that other staff members too, such as school aides and paraprofessionals and school safety agents have also been trained in supporting with things like the isolation room, which would be the room that a student or staff member would be able to utilize should they feel any of the COVID-19 symptoms. They would be removed from the environment that they're in and placed into the isolation room with a staff member who has been trained. In regards to testing and tracing, parents should have gotten a FAQ as well as a letter from the chancellor this week explaining the elements of random testing. Some schools may have even had a mobile unit show up. The mobile units, to my understanding, are showing up in different communities due to any rise in numbers. So that's in tandem with City Hall, and the mobile unit comes and students are randomly tested. Parents, there is a consent form for that to happen. So if you would like for your child or you don't mind, make sure your consent form indicates that. If you do mind and do not want your child to be tested, please make sure that your consent form indicates that. I got my consent form, I want to say like 2 days ago. So parents, if you should have that on file. Even if your child is remote, I would recommend that you put it on, that you have it on file at your child's school, just so they know that what your sentiments are, because we know that this is a constant, this is all moving and shaking contingent upon how the pandemic evolves. Another piece I wanted to talk about was the changing over from remote to blended or blended to remote. That is going to be coming up, I believe, the last week of October through November 13th, I want to say, where parents would be able to say, you know what, blended remote is not working, blended learning is not working for me. I want my child to go fully remote, or vice versa. Fully remote's not working for me. I want my child to go into the blended model. If that's the case, parents would have that time frame. This is one of 3 more times throughout the school year that we're anticipating parents being able to shift. And also, you know, because it gives parents an opportunity to see what's working for them. You know, for some people, they wanted to see where the DOE was going, and so they kept their children home. Once they see how it's evolving, they maybe say, no, time to change it up. So once that's done, we'll look at, and then you'll get to choose, of course, you'll go with the models that Executive Superintendent Sarduy talked about. I can give you some Queens North numbers. Let me look at my presentation here around how the models went. So in regards to remote learning, District 27, we're at about 40% remote learning requests. District 28, also 40%. District 29, 34% remote learning requests. And District 27, 28, and 29 high schools, about 41% requests for remote. And those numbers are ever changing because parents can switch from blended to fully remote. It's the fully remote to the blended piece that has to be done during that window of time that I mentioned before. And in terms of the models, so model 1 was where 2 cohorts meet with consistent days, 2 days a week, and an alternating day, and they have 5 days every 2 weeks. For model 1, District 27, we had about 21 schools choose model 1. District 28, 14 schools chose model 1. District 29, 11, and within the high schools, 8. Model 2 is where 3 cohorts with 1 consistent day each, and they have 2 alternating days and 5 days every 3 weeks. Within District 27, we had 17 schools chose Model 2, District 28, 7, District 29, 6, and high schools, 7. For Model 3, this was where 3 cohorts meet on a 6-day rotation, and this was only available to middle and high school students. And they have 5 days every 3 weeks. And that was for the high schools in District 27 and 28. 13 of them chose that. And models 4 and 5 were available to our D75 students who began school last Monday. And those 2 models gave students the opportunity to have school every other week for 5 days straight, with the potential for some groups to be in person full-time, depending upon the student need. So our D75 students, depending upon their need, they could be in school every 5 days. All right. Oh, the ventilation reports. So at this point, all schools have had their ventilation reports, and parents do have accessibility to those reports. Every school that is open has successfully passed within their ventilation surveys. If there was a challenge, we went back and made sure that the school was well. And what I mean by ventilation, just so you're clear, is that they either have a natural source of air, meaning there's a window that opens and closes, those things are checked for, windows and so forth, or there's a mechanical piece where there's an air conditioner in the room and natural air is brought in from outside. Rooms that did not have either of those things are not able to be used in schools. So I want to just make parents very clear on that. If there's a room without a window, if there's a room without an air conditioner, and they're not being used. They're not being used. You have to have either the mechanical or the natural air source. And with that, I think we complement each other, Mabel. And those are the pieces that may have been missing. So I'm excited to hear your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Degovia.
Govia, yep.
Govia. All right, so thank you for those pretty comprehensive presentations, but I can see the Q&A portion, the number of questions just keep going up and up and up and up and up. So I'm gonna turn this over to Monica Gutierrez, Education Director, as well as, I don't know if we're tag teaming with somebody else also from our Borough Hall team to help facilitate the Q&A. I'm gonna excuse myself for just a second. I'll be back in. But I know we have a lot of questions, and thank you also for being succinct with your opening to maximize the time for the interactive Q&A.
Great. Good evening, everybody. I'm Monica Gutierrez, Education Director for the Queens Borough President, Sharon Lee. So we're going to start with our questions. As the Borough President said, we have a lot of questions tonight. So I will start with my first question from, let's see, Jean Han. What is the grading policy for this year? And will it be returned to the pre-COVID policy? So if maybe Mabel, if you can answer that, thanks.
Sure. We don't have a policy as of yet. And we are getting all stakeholders involved with what that looks like. But as of right now, we have not set out as a DOE the policy as of yet. We are reaching out to our union partners, our elected officials, hearing from parents. I did a presentation for parents, and I was asking them, and I was telling my superintendents to share with their principals what worked in the policy during COVID and what did not work in the policy that you would like revised. We have to keep in mind that the policy is across the city, so equitable is very important, and that we are reaching all children and that no child is left behind when it comes to not having a device, not having Wi-Fi, connected late. There's a lot of still factors because we're in the pandemic. So we do not have a final policy yet, but more to come soon.
Thank you. So there's another question. Please confirm if New York City students will be taking state exams this year. Parents are depending on this as an important metric for accountability.
So just today, we got an email, executive superintendents got an email from the state ed department that stated that they're still looking into that. Assessments are thus far, assessments will not take place via computer. It would have to be live. They haven't decided and confirmed, will we have assessments in ELA and math for grades 3 through 8? So we're waiting for confirmation from the state, and then what the city will determine based on the state's recommendation.
Thank you, Executive Superintendent. So now I'm gonna be alternating with Carolina Gill from Queensborough Hall as well. So she'll be asking 2 questions, and then I'll be asking 2 questions as well. So Carolina, if you're ready, if not, I'll stay on.
I'm here. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. We have a question from a parent. How does the effect of COVID-19 impact the expected rollout of 3K programs? We need more 3K seats in District 27. When will it be revisited? Does someone
I'll
have
take that one. So, sure. So right now, district planning has, I just saw like my first meeting for district planning for high schools is actually planned for next week. Right now, there aren't any 3K programs on the docket for 27, but I'll definitely lift this moving forward. We have really been focusing our efforts on the reopening of schools. And the district planning piece, while it's very important, we haven't really dived in there because it's all been about ensuring the safety and health and wellness of our students and our staff members who are returning. Tomorrow marks our final first day, where our middle school students, our grades 6 to 12 students, our 9 to 12 students, and our transfer high school students will be returning to school. So I know that I'm anticipating that after tomorrow's first day, where we know who's going to be in school for this round is there, some degree of stability and normalcy can go back into play, and considering things like building up additional programs to 3K in District 27 can be discussed. But I will definitely lift it as an area of concern for parents. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. This is a very important question, and maybe we might not get the answer right now, but if maybe Mabel can take this. I'm not sure. PS 81, this is from a parent from PS 181. I'm a parent with a child in the Queen's Horizon program at PS 181. I was initially going to have my daughter attend full-time, as I was told Horizon program would not be remote. With all the busing issues, she decided to go fully remote. She was informed that her daughter would have a trained Horizon teacher, but that has not been the case. And so she's having a lot of issues. Could someone please help her to make sure that her daughter gets the help that she needs? You guys can see the Q&A, so maybe you guys can try to take maybe I'll see if I can get the person's information and someone can help her. But if you have an answer now, that would, or some information, some insight, that would be great.
So I will need, her information. So if we can get that, that will be great, so that I can help that individual parent. And I need to know the child's name, OSIS number, a couple of, personal information that I would need in order to help her. So, if the parent is on, you're welcome to email me, M.S. like in Sam, A.R., D like in David, U.Y. like yellow, at schools.nyc.gov, and I will make sure that someone reaches out to you.
Thank you, Mabel. Can I just ask you to type your email on the chat portion, because they'll be able to see it?
Sure.
Thank you. So my next question comes from Vanessa Sparks. What was the DOE high school grading policy for spring 2020 semester? Thank you. Does anyone want to talk about the grading policy for spring 2020 for high school?
Oh, for high school? Nadia, you want to take that?
Sure, I'll give it a try. So I believe that the grading policy last spring was revised to really 3 possible grades for high school. So yeah, so schools were encouraged to continue to use the same grading scales they had before. Remote learning with the addition of a course in progress rating for students who couldn't submit work or demonstrate mastery. And they were encouraged to attend, receive additional support over the summer. But all of this is actually in great detail on our website, and I'm gonna drop this link in the chat, and that's really the best resource to understand what the grading policy was last semester.
Thank you.
Oops,
All
We'll
right,
move on.
thanks. So a question from Morris Altman. What happens if a child does not wear a face mask covering in class? You know, little kids, they remove the mask, and we certainly
So
don't
that
want the little
actually,
kids borrowing
last
anybody's
night's,
mask.
yeah, we just got some guidance around the mask wearing piece. Of course, we want to encourage our children to wear the mask because we know that the mask wearing actually helps within the halting of the transmission. For our little people, I know our children who are in 3K, pre-K, kindergarten, even first and second grade, it could be a bit much. Even for adults, it could be a bit much to continuously have to wear the mask. Children are allowed to take the mask off when they eat, when they have something to drink. Parents, if there is a more extenuating circumstance, you could alert the school. If there's a doctor's note that needs to be submitted, that's also being considered. But we're really pushing to make sure that children have the mask on as much as possible. Teachers are also being encouraged to think about what a mask break could look like within the classroom. But again, this is one of those security measures. You're also allowed to put a face shield in addition to the mask. The idea that the mask being described as a cloth covering over the nose and the mouth area. So just ensuring that our children are safe is really what's key. So the mask piece is there. However, there are considerations being given around breaks, especially when the kids are eating or drinking. Parents, the best bet I could tell you is, work with your children. If you know you're sending your child back into a school, help them, build up stamina for wearing the mask, talk to them about it, why it's important, what are the things that they can do, how to advocate for themselves. I know what it's like to have a young person, my 7-year-old, she would have a challenge with the mask piece consistently. But just like what does it look like to advocate for yourself and say, you know what, I've been wearing this mask for 3 hours, can I get a break? And teachers also being aware that yes, you can give a mask break, but it's got to go back on eventually. So that's one of those things that we really have to work with our children on to help them. And the good news is, I visited like in the summer, I saw a lot of the rec centers going on, and the kids were great with the mask piece. I think how the adults choose to model it also makes a big difference. So again, talk to your child, make sure they know how to advocate for themselves and exercise their own agency within that space. But we also have to remember that we're in a public space and safety comes first. So the mask has to be worn.
And I've been visiting different schools just to add this week. And I mean, kindergartners, second graders, and they're all wearing their masks because this is unfortunately the new normal. Everyone in the school is wearing a mask. All the adults are being role models and we're wearing our mask. And like my colleagues said, we're building in mass breaks so that children get a break from wearing the mask and then putting it back on. It's for their safety and for others' safety. So it's important that we continue, and thank you to the parents for being so throughout the summer and throughout from March through June. It gave you an opportunity to work with your children on wearing a mask. And we see it. We see it when they walked in this week for live instruction, and that came from your efforts. So thank you so much.
All right, another question. How does the DOE protect the community from parents that do not tell the truth on the daily survey form?
So the daily, we're hoping that everyone is true to their word. We have a health expert at the school or a nurse. And if the child is feeling ill for any reason, the teacher, he or she should advocate for themselves and say that they're not feeling well, and they'll be sent to the nurse. The nurse will check the temperature and then call a guardian to pick the child up. So we are hoping that families are consistently understanding that it's for their safety as well as others to be truthful around this survey. And again, temperature checks are taken at the entrance of every child every day. If you don't have that screen 4 questions done, they're done in person, and that day that temperature is taken from that child. So we have ways of getting the temperature to see if that's one symptom that the child may have. Of course, that's, there's many other symptoms. That's just one of many. So I'm hoping that parents will ensure that their child's safety as well as the safety of others are a priority within a school.
Thank you.
Great.
And I just put the health screening link into the chat. So parents, if you click on that, there's, if you go down to the bottom, it'll say, do you want to add this to your phone? If you know your child is going into school or your child themselves are going into school with their own particular phone, please have that downloaded and answered before going in.
Thank you. And I'm going to just ask you a question. I know you said this already, but parents are asking if you can please repeat the deadline window for time change from remote to in-person.
Sure. Mabel, you can confirm for me. I know it's in your notes. I think it's October 26th to November 13th. And then it starts on November 16th.
Let me check my notes.
Thank you.
We can go on to the next question while I check my notes.
Perfect. Can data information be shared via email from both executive superintendents regarding the number of schools and remote learning percentages? So I guess this is from Charlene. Maybe if we could find what her school is. I guess she's looking to see how many students are doing remote compared to how many students are live.
Sure. I mean, actually, the principal should have that information. I don't know if there's been a school leadership team meeting or a PTA or a PA meeting, but in the town hall meetings, many principals throughout the city from August to now have been doing consistent town hall meetings. If that has not happened, I don't know which side of Queens Ms. Charlene is on, but if it's the north, you can email Mabel and she can help you with that, or if not, you can email me if it's in the south.
Thank you.
And we'll help you get that. That's
Yep.
I have one last question and then we'll move on to Monica. What happens if the school did not send a consent form for testing?
for the COVID testing?
Correct.
That should have gone home. That should have gone home like 2 days ago. So you can either inquire, if you're not getting it, again, just email us and we can make sure you get it. But I would like to know what school that is, because that's really important information, because these mobile units are beginning to show up at schools and I don't want parents to be surprised by the request.
So the mobile units also will not screen a child unless they have a consent from the family. So if the parent has not consented, there'll be different outreach, from the parent coordinator or the designee at the school with regards to trying to encourage the parents to fill out the consent, yes or no. The mobile units will not test unless we have a consent.
Thank you.
And Minashki is awesome. She's our wonderful parent person for us to here in Queens. She sent it to me. She emailed it to me, Mabel. It's October 26th to the 30th.
Thank you. I couldn't find it in my notes, you know, I have to.
Believe me, I've got like 3 screens open over here
Right?
to keep it going.
Okay, so here we have another question. So this is from Ms. Jones. Why isn't the DOE following up on mandatory testing for everyone? I was informed by the District 29 President's Council that children and all employees are not mandated, and they were told to be highly recommended.
I didn't hear the first part of the question. Can you repeat it?
So why isn't the DOE following up on mandatory testing for everyone? So this parent was informed by the District 29 President's Council that it's not mandatory for all children and employees to be tested.
So we have made we've made the request of folks to go in and be tested coming back in. You'll notice I'm sure you've heard about numbers going up in schools, and that's because people are being tested. You know, to mandate the testing piece, I'm sure that
mandatory for all children and employees to be tested.
Oh, I'm hearing an echo. Yeah, so within the mandating piece, it gets a little tricky around, you know, it's like we've got the same reason why we need the consent forms for the students. We can't just say, okay, well, you're here in school, let me test you. I mean, parent consent has to be involved, as well as adults have to give consensual pieces too, to have to be tested. So at this point, it's at a place of request. As things evolve, that may shift, but right now it's at a place of requesting, and people have been pretty compliant because they want to know, you know, they want to make sure that they're well going into spaces. And on the parent question around how do we ensure that parents are being honest, I just want to revisit that for 1 second. It's really a community effort to ensure the health and wellness of all of our children and our staff members. I'll tell you, in the DOE, for staff members who are not compliant and who are not in accordance with quarantining and so forth, if they know they have been somewhere where they would have required quarantining or they didn't get tested, we're examining that and looking at that very, very seriously for people who have not told the truth. So that's how we're managing on the staff end. And on the parent end, it's really, we're imploring that parents, please, you know, this is a community effort. And we're seeing that within New York City, different parts of our city are facing numbers that are rising. So we want to ensure that you're using the health screening, you're using the thermometers that are available, and you're being forthcoming with what's going on in the home. We want to make sure that if anyone's been exposed to anything that is contrary to wellness, that you're not bringing it into the public school space. So where possible, we're moving forward with the request at this point. We'll see if it gets to a place of mandating, but mandating begins to look at the violation of rights, of people's rights. So we're keeping it in this space for now, and hopefully intending that folks, you know, do right.
Thank you, Dr. De Govia. What is the update of handling the staffing situation, the lack of teachers to provide an education that students deserve?
Yeah, this is the topic that keeps me up at night. We are really ensuring that, like, tomorrow's our third and final first day. We want to ensure that every child is greeted by an adult who is qualified and capable to be with them. For our students, with the big push at this point has been just tapping into as many different pipelines as we possibly can tap into. So that's everything from our substitute list, our certified teacher pool, reaching out to Teach for America, reaching out to our teaching fellows, using CUNY and our student teachers who are now eligible to teach. To my understanding, HR has reached out over 100,000 folks to bring them in for interviews. The mayor has recently re-released some new monies for this reason. And we're looking to staff and make sure that all our children are in front of qualified, certified teachers. This is an ongoing effort, and it's something that we face on a yearly basis. Furthermore, now that we're balancing both blended and remote, but know that we are definitely committed to making sure that this happens and that multiple streams of pipelines for teachers are being looked at so we can have the qualified, certified folks in front of our students that they deserve, so that instruction is not interrupted.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Govia. I just want to pass it over. I think the Queens Borough President has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Monica. And I apologize for waiting for their questions to be answered. I noticed that this question hasn't been addressed yet, and it is very timely, as are the other questions as well. Middle school, high school screenings, admissions tests. Maybe this is something that Ms. Chadha could help answer, and the Office of Student Enrollment, G&T testing. Are there timelines or schedules for that? This time in a regular year, sans COVID, right now, if not already, would be around the time when parents and families are preparing for all of those processes. So what does that look like for this year?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I know this is a really top of mind, especially for 5th and 8th graders who will be applying this year. And I completely understand, because this is a lot. This is our lives in the Office of Student Enrollment. And right now we do not have updates on what will be happening with screening, about the timeline for admissions, because as the executive superintendents mentioned earlier, much of our leadership staff, everyone is kind of redeploying efforts towards making sure that schools are opening safely. A lot of our staff are in buildings supporting that process, and come the start of our final first day of school, we're hoping for more information on what this will look like this year. What we can say is that normally during this time of the year, families would be encouraged to start to explore their options and schools of interest, and that's certainly something you can do right now. I highly, highly encourage all families to visit our website to sign up for admissions alerts. I'll drop that link in the chat in a second, but what that will do is, as soon as our application process kicks off for this fall, we'll be notifying families, sharing information about what it will look like. And we really, really, at least in our office, really want to make sure we are sharing as much information as early as possible. And we understand that there are a ton of constraints all over the place. But we really are trying to make sure information is shared quickly as soon as we can. So all that to say, I'm going to drop the link. Please do sign up. Please look at myschools.nyc, which is our online directory. And there you can start to think about what schools are of interest, what schools are near you, what schools you might be eligible for, and at least start to build that list so that when the process kicks off, you'll really be prepared to jump right in. And of course, our teams are always here. All of our email addresses are online. And so we'll be able to answer any other questions you have as you search for these schools.
So am I to, just to be clear, am I to understand? So middle school, high school screening, specialized high school, admissions test, the SHSATs, the G&T screenings. So the schedule has not been set. Is there a sense of when the schedule will be set or available so that we can start planning?
Yeah, I totally understand. So at the a parent meeting a few weeks ago,
we can start planning to plan, right?
Yeah, at the parent meeting maybe last week even, the chancellor was asked this question, and he did reiterate that all of our staff have been laser focused on school reopening. I think that there will be an opportunity to get more concrete dates in the next couple of weeks after this process kicks off. But from our perspective, we can't promise anything at this moment. That's why we're really encouraging families to do some of that homework early on and still take advantage of the time they have now. We also know that some schools that you might be interested in might already be starting to think about events, virtual events that they might be having to introduce families to schools. And so we encourage families to reach out to schools about that. But of course, we'd like all this for all of this to be like very centralized, available in a very centralized way. And that's why we just need a little bit of time to turn back to this issue and try to provide all the information at once rather than have it filtering through over the next few months.
I see. Okay. And if I may, I am compelled to bring this up. I promised a young student that I would. I was interviewed by her, 8-year-old Fatia Ayat, earlier today, and she talked about virtual field trips. Her class has it. She enjoyed it. She asked if there's a way that could be broadened in more schools, or where more kids can enjoy that. She said that she got a link from her teacher to some of the, kind of field trip type, a virtual field trip. She clicked on it herself and would explore it online. And I asked her, do you do that? Did you do that alone, or was it as a class activity where you can talk about what you're virtually exploring? And she said it was the former. Are there any explorations into that type of sort of creative virtual field trip experience certainly for some of the younger grades?
For sure. Many schools are using the virtual tours,
Okay.
and many museums and libraries are doing virtual trips. And so we did it from March through June, and we will continue to do it during September through December, because it is a nice experience for children, and of all grades.
That's right.
And definitely that's something that teachers can use as a tool to enhance their instruction and their content. Yes.
Wonderful. I have a few more questions, but let me pass it back over to Monica Gutierrez and Carolina Gill. Let's get some more questions from the parents.
Thank you. I have a question regarding temperature checks. Are temperature checks mandatory for all students?
If a child comes with a parent and fills out the health screening in person, the temperature is mandated to be taken that day, at that moment. If you do the screening at home and you've answered all the questions and you have a clear on your iPhone, or you printed it out, then the mandated temperature check is not necessary.
Okay. And so this kind of piggybacks on that. What happens if a parent does not sign the consent form for testing? Will the child be removed from blended?
No. So meaning refuses to have the form, or just won't sign it?
Won't sign the consent form for testing.
Then the child won't get tested. That's
but
all.
the child can remain in blended.
Yeah, the child wouldn't be removed from blended.
So I want to add, it's mandated to do a random check, and it starts October, next week it starts. And so if your child is one of the 10% or 20% to be tested and they don't have a consent, then we will try everything possible to reach out to the parent. Children have to be randomly tested. If the parent opts not to be tested, they will be asked to go to remote learning, because we cannot take a chance with students and with staff. Children have to be checked randomly. Maybe they won't check them this time around, because
they wouldn't test them though. They wouldn't.
They wouldn't test.
Yeah, they wouldn't test them.
Correct. They would not test. They won't, unless they have the consent from the parent.
I just want to be clear because I got two mixed answers. I got they will not be tested and they will be removed from blended. And then the doctor said that they would not be removed from blended. Can you guys clarify for our parents?
Okay, so if the parent refuses to sign the consent, we would have a conversation with the parent and the principal would have a conversation with the parent. If they refuse totally, they would have to opt for the remote learning. That's how the policy as of today stands. Will it change later on? Perhaps, but right now.
Just to clarify to Mabel's point, it's not immediate. So
Correct.
Right, that's why I said you wouldn't, it's not like you immediately, oh, you don't want to sign, it's a done deal. It's not immediate.
That's right. We will have conversation with the parents. It's not immediately that your child is taken out.
Right, and your child wouldn't be, if you said, no, I'm not signing this, okay, there's a follow-up. It's not like, okay, you're out of here type of thing.
Exactly.
That's what I want to make that distinction very clear.
Yeah, we want to work with the families.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So what is being done to ensure that students in temporary housing have adequate access to technology and internet?
So I saw a few questions in the chat around devices. So right now we are short on devices from Central, and we are aware of it, and it's being worked on. Hopefully within the coming weeks, and definitely before October's out, those of you who have filled out for devices will get them. Just because there's a shortage right now doesn't mean that parents should not fill out for them. You should fill out for it because there is a reordering process happening right now. It probably should have happened already. So we are aware of that. There's also free Wi-Fi, and I have the email actually. I'll go into it while we're going through the questions, but there is free Wi-Fi also available. So for families that may not have access to Wi-Fi, there are certain carriers that are supporting within that effort. So I'll put those, I'll find that email and put those links in there. But for right now, yes. And there are schools that have do have technology. If your child got their technology from their respective school and they graduated, there is a request to return that device. If your child, however, got the device from New York City, you can travel with that device. So I do want to make that clear also, because I know some parents are like, the school asked for the laptop back. If the school gave the laptop, they do have the right to request it back for their students who are coming up if the child graduated. But if you got it from Central or New York City, you're able to travel with that laptop.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question to that. So what are the schools doing to help the kids who don't have the computer so that they don't fall behind? So how do they submit their work if they don't have, their parents with 2 and 3 kids who don't have an iPad and they have to wait for one? So what is the school doing so that the kids don't fall behind? How are they submitting their work, or how is it being mailed to them? Or
yeah, some schools have been doing mailings. I was going to say that some schools have done mailings for the students, and it's really, and like luckily sometimes it's families, multi-families, so sometimes kids are sharing devices. I've heard a lot of different creative ways in which, but it should not be held against the child. If we know that the parents have put in for a device, they haven't gotten it yet, we're trying our best to make sure that we close that gap as soon as possible. In the spring, we had gotten to a very healthy place where there were enough, every child had their device, but we also now have our 3K students who are coming in for the first time, our pre-K students, and even some of our kindergarten students who are coming in for the first time. So parents, just please be patient with us, because we are prioritizing that we have our high school students who have a much more higher demand in terms of screen time for synchronous learning. So for those students who are coming into our system for the first time, and in high school or middle school, we're looking at making sure that they get their supplies first, and then we're filling in the gaps in the lower grades. And that's really because their synchronous teaching time is more than a child who is 3 years old.
I just want to add, if schools are prioritizing the grades that are mandatory by state education law, which would be K through 12, because I know there's 3K and pre-K and they're giving those kids iPads, but really 3K and pre-K are not mandatory programs like K through 12. So
Right. Mhm.
maybe that way, if they prioritize, schools prioritize K through 12 kids.
Yeah, I know they're prioritizing, they're doing high school, middle, and then working their way down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolina?
Yes, there's two questions. Who has the contract to do the random testing? And where are the test results stored, and who has access to them?
So I'd have to follow up on the who. I know that the mobile units, I'm assuming this question's referring to.
Yes.
It's a relationship that's being executed through City Hall. And they're the ones actually guiding us based on the numbers that they are tracking and tracing within COVID-19 to determine where they go. So I could find out the who. I'd have to follow up on that. And tell me the second, there were two more parts of the question.
I'm sorry. The question is who has the contract?
Right, so that I'll follow up on to find out
Okay,
who.
and the other one is where are the results being stored and who has access to them?
Right, so, and this is why the consent piece is so key. I mean, we're dealing with people's health records here. I can follow up on all those pieces, but there is privacy rules and regulations in place. And that's why even with the health screening paper, if you're filling that out, you're not putting your name on it. I'll have to find out more details in terms of that piece, because that's something that actually that's City Hall managing it, not the New York City Department of Education. They're doing it at schools. I mean, that's where we jump in. But in terms of the privacy laws and so forth, I'm not 100% clear on how that information is being maintained. But I also would like to believe that it would be similar to other COVID testing sites where the information sticks within for the person who's been tested and is not then used, to say, okay, well, this person tested, because it's not only the school being tested, it's the community. It's a community site as well. So it's not only for the immediate school community. My understanding is that these mobile units they're at a school, but in service of the larger community.
So if you get that information, if you could share that with us, then maybe we can share that with parents at our
Absolutely.
parent advisory board. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have a question. What academic help is available for remote learning students? If someone, like after school, I guess an after school program, this particular parent would like to get some help, after school help for math and science. What are their options?
So Mabel spoke about the Learning Bridges program, but that's for students who are blended remote. For students who are fully remote, the best bet can be around how principals have organized their schools for any intervention or any academic after-school programming. I could tell you right now that probably is on hold due to ensuring reopening and making sure that staffing is in place to get that going. I think we'll be able to have a much clearer picture about what school can possibly be once this final third day of the first day occurs. So, be in contact with your school's PTA and let it be known. But in terms of a larger DOE central piece around after school programming, there isn't that available. But what is available is if your child is in blended and on their remote days, they can attend the Learning Bridges program where they would receive academic support for the work that they have to do.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. How are schools making sure that they have enough PPE?
Okay, so there's a 30-day supply that's delivered to schools. And at this point, we should be in our second, in some schools, their third round of receiving PPE. Some lessons learned is that certain programs within schools require additional amounts of PPE. For example, some of our D75 programs, we learned that they require actually a little bit more. So that conversation happens between the school and the borough support office. So we have a director of operations who has been tracking for any issues. And we've been good about the PPE piece. We've had some thermometer glitches, but we're making sure that they get calibrated so that that reads properly. But in terms of the gowns, the masks, the hand sanitizers, the sprayers that the custodians use, making sure they have the electrostatic sprayer, and making sure that they have the correct solution. I mean, these are conversations that are continuously happening. We did multiple walkthroughs to ensure that these pieces were in place. I myself personally checked supply closets to see what was in them to make sure that that's occurring. But the expectation is that there would be 30-day supplies on hand for our students and our staff members and custodians. I know I spoke to a few custodians who even used their own personal custodial budgets to help supplement what may not have been in place. If you've gone to a school, you may have noticed things like the plexiglass around the safety agent's desk or in main offices. All of those are examples of PPE going up. And of course, you should see staff members, you know, with the mask and the hand sanitizers and so forth. Parents, the expectation is that you would not have to supply your children with any PPE stuff going into the building, that the building would have that. So far so good. I haven't heard actually any PPE complaints on my end, and any places that were, and we also have distribution stations throughout the 5 boroughs. So if you were to run low, there's a school that you can go to go pick up stuff and get your supply while you're waiting for the 30-day delivery, if that were to be the case. So a lot of ground is covered with the PPE piece.
Great, thank you. I just want to add, Alon put in the chat, so if parents can see there, a message to families about COVID testing from the chancellor. So the link is there. If parents have any questions about COVID testing, they can go to that link.
Thank you, Alon. And in that link, you should find the consent form and the FAQs. Okay, and parents, you know, I can't, one thing I didn't stress, I talked about kids and they're advocating for themselves. Parents, you know, please utilize your own agency around this particular piece. I know it's a very sensitive topic, and, you know, please speak to your child's principal when making this decision so that everyone's clear about how you would expect your child to be managed within the random testing, because it's something that's being implemented to keep the community safe. So where possible, if you have strong feelings about it either way, let it be known so at least we're clear and we can get your child situated in the way that meets your household's needs and you feel safe and comfortable with.
Thank you. I have a question. There's a shortage of custodial staff with schools sharing custodians. How are these schools being cleaned throughout the day when constant wiping down of handrails, doorknobs, and surfaces touched by the public need to be constantly wiped down per health protocols, and there are not enough custodians?
So in Queens North, if we have a shared custodian, we have a fire engineer and a custodial helper. And so there is a team of people during the day and there's a part-time people during the evening. So we haven't heard anything in Queens North around needing extra support as far as staff. And like my colleague mentioned, if there's any supplies that are needed, and I also, you know, went to different schools in Queens North, we are fully stocked with a 30-day supply, and there's a borough area where the custodians can go pick up any materials that they need. So far we're doing well as far as the staffing as well as the supplies.
And to that end, there's also like scheduling going on between the principal and the custodian to see like what it looks like to routinely clean high touch areas like water fountains, hot hand, doorknobs, light switches. So they're on a schedule, and they're doing amazing work. And if you see a custodian, hug a custodian, because they're teaming with one another also across buildings at times to make the magic happen. So in some areas there are shortages, but it's not to a place where we can't get the job done. So it's been a very communal effort among that particular constituency to make sure, between the principal and the custodian and the cleaners, that there's a schedule followed, there's routines around how what the sanitizing looks like. I've had conversations with custodians about the intentionality around disinfectants. Some disinfectants have to sit for 1 minute before you wipe it down. I mean, there's a lot at play. And the core interest is making sure that the area is clean and safe for our children when they return the next day and throughout the day for the high touch areas.
Since we're on the subject of PPE, and I'm sorry, Charlene, I just have I have a personal question, just to follow up for the executive superintendent, Sarduy. You mentioned about kids, the little ones, possibly having a break for the mask. I'm just curious to know, how would that work? How long is that break? And how does that work in terms of social distancing, where the child removes a mask? Is that like a 2-minute thing, or how is that supposed to work?
Yeah, so it depends on the child's age, right? So 5-year-olds is different from a 10-year-old, and children can advocate for themselves, and we teach them to advocate for themselves around when they need that break. And so for a 5-year-old, 5 minutes is a very long time, or 3 minutes is a very long time. And just giving them the opportunity to take it off and take that break and then putting it back on gives them a sense of ownership, and it gives them a sense of a break. So it's individualized, and it depends on the child. If a child can't keep the mask on for whatever reason, those are things that it's important that families communicate with the school, so that the principal, the parent coordinator, the guidance counselor, they know the individual needs of children who can and cannot or need breaks in between.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna pass it over to Carolina now.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually gonna switch topics. I'm going to busing issues. I have a parent of a special needs child who was not picked up by the bus. What is the procedure for her to report this?
The first thing is to reach out to the principal, because the principal is able to reach out to the bus route and identify what place for the child to be picked up. So that's your first, I think going to the principal and letting him or her know is the first priority that parent should share. If it's in my district, and I'm sure in my colleagues, let us know so that we can intervene and help support to ensure that the bus company picks up your child.
Thank you. The next one is DOE prepared to switch to fully remote if there's an uptake in coronavirus cases?
Absolutely. Our chancellor has mentioned time and time again that the health and safety of all children and all staff are a priority. So they're looking at, and we're looking at statistics guided by the health professionals, and we are ready to go full remote if need be for the safety of all children and all staff.
And a follow-up to that, which was part of this parent's question, is will there be enough devices for those parents to give out to kids if that were the case?
There would have to be. I mean, there would have to be. I mean, it is, we're lifting for 1.1 million children. And if we go back just the same way in the spring, right? In the spring, we were very much in a reactive mode, like trying to secure and make sure everyone is safe. And within that space, we were able to get our devices out to our students. Some later than others, we understand, but they got their devices. Now we've got a new cadre of kids who we have to make sure has that same privilege and that same opportunity and that same access. If we were to go fully remote, they would be, make it happen. So, you know, what we would just request from parents is the patience and to work with us, because again, we're just all managing a pandemic for the first time, and we're all committed to making sure that our children's instruction is not disrupted. So if the devices were needed at that scale, we would have to deliver and have to come up with them. That's just how it would have to be, because instruction can be interrupted.
Yeah, and I might just add, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, so many of the students who are in blended are actually learning remote some of the days. So I think that means that, you know, like we're addressing those issues now while they're starting school. But hopefully, if we go all remote, we'll be very prepared at that point.
Caroline, I'm sorry, before you jump into the next question, I just have a follow-up to that one. So is the DOE in talks with the major computer companies like Microsoft and Dell and the others? And has anybody tapped into maybe like, you know, Mr. Bezos from Amazon to see if maybe he would like to work with the DOE? I mean, I know it didn't go well for New York City before, but maybe in education, I mean, he did have, you know, an initiative in his prior plan. So are there any talks of like talking to these major computer corporations that can come in and help these kids? Because I'm hearing, you know, their schools, I mean, there's another question here. The school has like over 100 kids who don't have a device. So that's an issue.
So I know that there are talks with who the talks are taking place with. I don't have preview to that. I will lift up some of your recommendations to the chancellor and central folks. We did that, you know, from March through June, and that's where we got the computers that many of our students have. Because the chancellor tapped into Apple and other companies, and so we continue to do that. But I don't know if they're touching bases with
Jeff Bezos
from Amazon. I don't know, but I definitely will tell them, hey, like you said, I don't know if he's friendly with New York right now. But we are tapping into all possibilities and all opportunities for our youngsters to ensure that they have the necessary tools to be productive. If there's a child who doesn't have a device, then we need to know, the school needs to know, so that we can provide materials, hard copy materials, paper packets, so that child, it has access to the work. So it's very important that parents are open and trusting and flexible and sharing with us what the needs are at the school level, so that we can support each and every family, because every family has different needs.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Carolina, go ahead.
It's okay. I have a question from a parent back to busing. Are parents notified if there are more than one, if their children in a bus from different schools?
Not necessarily. Is it about the route?
I'm not sure. I guess they want to know if they're just children from the same school. I guess
I mean, it is possible that
case on the school, they'll know the kids on the bus were from the school, but if they're from different schools, I guess that's the concern.
Oh, I see. I see. Yes. So again, Mabel. But
yeah. So the route, the principal knows the route and where the children are coming from. God forbid there is a positive case. all those students will be, the parents will be notified and to follow up and to quarantine. Same procedures. So I'm not sure if the parent has that information, but I know that the principal has that information, which is the route. It could be one school depending on how many students are picked up, but it could be two routes, two different locations.
And also note, to Mabel's point about if a child were to have COVID, they would follow the procedures on that side. The procedures of getting onto the bus, the procedures of how many children are on the bus also fall in line with the COVID-19 safety and health regulations. So there's social distancing on the bus, temperatures, random testing showing your health screening, that's happening too going on to the bus, as it would for after school programs. If you were doing some outdoor learning somewhere, like every particular space that a child could be in, just please note that the health and safety regulations are in effect.
Thank you. This is a question from a parent. If the positive rate continues to be over 3%, what steps are taken and when? If the transition is to remote learning to all, how does the transition happen and for how long does it happen?
So the first part of the question about the 3%, so if, I know this parent's been listening to the chancellor, because he has said that once the citywide rate is over 3% for 7 consecutive days, that's the caveat. It's not just 3%, it's over a period of time. Then we would look at possibly closing schools, and it has to be at a citywide rate. So that's one. In terms of what it would look like to go back fully remote, I don't want to speak that into existence just yet, as we've worked very hard to get to this point of reopening. But I'm sure that it would, if it were to be the way it was in the spring, at least this time we would know what we're walking into, but it would be around just ensuring the health and the safety of our children. It would be around making sure that children have devices and that teachers are up and ready to be able to teach. New York City doesn't stop. So we really we want to make sure that whatever, if that were to be a transitional need, there would be urgency and intentionality in place around how we would go forward. You know, at this point, we're not at that conversation, but I know the elephant in the room is that the numbers in the city are rising, and we are very much so paying attention to that. I know in certain parts of my community within Queens South, the numbers are higher than in other parts of the city, and the mayor is very aware of it, as is the chancellor, and we're tracking for that. And where we need to do what we need to do to make sure that health and safety come first, we're going to do that. So note that if we were to go fully remote, it is really in the space of keeping everyone well. And it's a possibility because, as we know, we may be done with COVID-19, but COVID-19 is not done with us. So, you know, more to come on that. And we thank you for your cooperation and your flexibility as we find out more about what's possible in terms of managing schools during this pandemic.
And these mobile COVID testing sites for the community in the neighborhood of schools is for just that, so that children, parents, the community, the school community can get tested if they would like. It's very important that people get tested and quarantine if they need to, so that we flatten the curve, not add to the numbers. We've had 3%. I didn't hear what today was, but yesterday was 3%. We have to make sure that it stays under that. We don't want it higher than that. And like my colleague said, for 7 consecutive days. The second part of that question was for how long would we be remote? We don't know, because we have to go with what the health experts advise the chancellor and the mayor, and they will determine how long a school will be out remotely.
Thank you.
Please note I put the free Wi-Fi in the chat.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so I have a question here. What is the long-term plan to get public school students back into the building 5 full days a week?
When the science and the health professionals share that it's safe to come back full, we will be ready with open doors. We are just as anxious as all of you to have, it was so nice to have 2 openings, and tomorrow will be our 3rd, to seeing those beautiful faces. I mean, the principals, the teachers, they were like, oh my God, it's so nice to see kids back in a school. We are just as anxious as you are to have all our young people in our schools. But we have to listen to the health experts, and that's what is going to guide the chancellor and the mayor.
Thank you. So I have another question here from a parent. Says, are principals making sure their school have enough PPE, or is this responsibility being fallen on the custodial staff who don't run the school? Because it was a school in Brooklyn where a teacher tested positive for COVID-19 and the disinfecting sprayers were found still in the box. What are principals doing or should be doing to ensure that the health protocols are being followed so that disinfecting sprayers that were provided by the DOE are being used?
So that it's a
I
joint
mean,
effort.
that.
It's a joint,
Go ahead, Mabel.
it's a joint effort between the principal and the custodian, and the entire team, to make sure that the equipment is working. Several different people went out to inspect and check to make sure that these resources were available and in working order. Before we opened up, there were some glitches with some thermometers, and they had to reprogram the thermometers. And so we checked prior to opening that equipment. If there's an individual school, and in this case was in Brooklyn, but it could happen in any of our, throughout our boroughs. If that happens, you please let us know, let your principal know, because they're using those supplies on a constant basis. And so it's a joint effort between the principal and the custodial staff.
Thank you. Okay, let's see.
I have a question, Monica. This is regarding the learning bridges. Can a lunch program be used to support the learning bridges sides? Maybe pick up from the school on a learning bridge day?
Oh, they would have access to grab and goes. Yes, they would have access to food.
So that's currently in place.
Yeah, so, and some of the Learning Bridges programs are, Mabel, I heard you said that yours were not in schools. Were yours in community centers?
Yes.
Okay, so some of mine are in schools.
Okay.
So they would have access to the cafeteria, but yes, even in a community center though, they would be a food available, of course, breakfast and lunch, to our children, absolutely.
Thank you. I have someone, and I know we talked about this earlier, and I believe you posted the link on the chat, but this person is asking, our school is asking us to fill out a clearance form, which I'm assuming is the health form.
The health screening, yes.
So they're saying, yeah, so they want to know how do they do that? So
you have two options.
Yes.
Right, so schools have the paper form. I mentioned earlier that if the forms have the name on it, you don't have to put your name. And it's a series of questions like, have you been exposed to anyone? Does anybody in your household have a fever? It's a series of yes, no questions, and you submit that and your temperature would be taken at the door. You also have the option of either filling out a link online, which I put in earlier in the chat. And that link gives you an opportunity to download an icon, which you can just show on your phone once you've answered the questions, and you get like a green check or a green circle. And you show that at the door and you should be good to go. But the bottom line is, yes, if you are going into a New York City public school, the same way you would have to show ID, The additional piece now is that you have to show that your health screening is good to go.
Perfect.
I have a question here. What is the status of the District 28 diversity plan? Some schools don't have enough teachers and nurses, and there is high anxiety over safety concerns. So why are resources being put towards this instead of pausing until COVID is over?
In regards to the diversity, the District 28 diversity plan is on pause right now. I actually haven't managed that at all. I know it's a concern, and I've been to the CEC meetings within 28 and the parent meetings. Right now, that's on pause until we get solidified within school reopening. And it also connects back to the district planning question that was asked earlier around 3K. It's around the same piece. Once we get solidified with opening and we're clear on where we're going with that, then we're going to start engaging the other pieces. Now, in terms of the schools that don't have, I think a nurse was mentioned.
Yes, correct.
If I can know what school that is, because the promise tomorrow, we're at our third and final opening day, and the understanding and the promise from the mayor and the chancellor is that every school has a nurse. So if you don't have one, I would need to know who that is and find out what the story is there, because according to my data, every school within Queens South has been assigned a nurse.
I'll follow up and I'll let you know.
And was there, Monica, was there something else, the nurse and other things are missing, they said?
I already
You scrolled.
Yeah, moved the question. I can come back to it.
Okay.
I have another one.
And in the meantime, Manashki strikes again. You're like a ninja, Manashki, helping us in the background. She sent me I believe that's the survey, that's the health screening questionnaire that I just put into the chat. So parents, you get to see what that looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Queens does not have enough high school seats, and therefore many of our high school students attend specialized and screen schools in other boroughs. This makes the SHASAT and the state test especially important for Queens students. What are you doing to make sure that we have the seats that we need? Maybe Office of Enrollment, Nadiya.
Yeah, I can take the SHASAT question. So right now we are considering all the ways that we need to adjust SHASAT testing to ensure that it's safe, that we can provide equitable access to families across the city and follow public health guidelines. So we don't have any updates on what that's going to look like right now, but we will provide updates as soon as we have them. And in regards to state testing, I think that since that is a state administered test, if the state is going to provide it, then the DOE will be administering it.
Thank you.
I have a parent who has a son that gets related services, but they cannot fit this in his schedule. Is it possible for her to get an RSA since the service is not provided in the school? It will provide more flexibility in these difficult times.
Yeah, so I'm glad this question was asked, and Mabel, please chime in. So the IEP guides what the child is entitled to. So I'm not really, I've heard this.
Can't hear too much. Can you speak louder or maybe put the volume higher?
Can you hear me now? Are you not able to hear me?
It just seemed louder before. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sitting in the same spot. No, but the IEP, can you hear me? I'm talking using my cafeteria voice.
Yes, we hear you.
Why are you talking so loud? So the IEP is the guiding factor. So is the school not able, I'm not clear why the related services piece is not being necessarily generated at the school. If that were to be the case, then yes, the parent is entitled to putting for an alternative to, because the IEP guides, it just guides. And I'm curious about what's happening that it's not happening at the school. So before we go to the route of the RSA, I want to know what's happening. So if this is a Queens South School, please email me. And if it's Mabel, please email her in Queens North. But the IEP, so for parents who are listening, all related services are to go forward. It may look different. Maybe you'll have a virtual situation as opposed to an in-person situation, but the bottom line is that you have a situation. And we don't get to ignore the construct of the IEP because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. It may be a matter of helping schools with staffing or figuring out, financially how we can adjust things. But the idea that the related services would not occur and it's on the IEP, that's not in tandem with one another, and the child's supposed to get their services.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going through the questions.
While she goes through the questions, I'll ask one. I know this was already addressed, but if for anybody who came on board to the meeting a little bit late, so how will middle school admissions be addressed this year, given that state tests were not administered last year and these tests are typically used for screen schools and programs?
Sure. So at the end of the last school year, in May and June, we did a series of engagements with families, school leaders, community members, advocacy groups around this exact issue. And we heard, a very, very wide range of perspectives. I think we even were at one of these meetings to talk about this particular issue. So you're right that because of COVID-19 and the suspension of state tests and changes in the grading policy, screening really cannot continue in the same way as it has in the past. And so what we did with those engagements was hear from a lot of members of our school communities, and we're still thinking about and developing a fair and equitable plan based on that feedback, but also considering that we don't want the pandemic to be held against any student. So what I mentioned earlier is just that we don't have updates on the plan for this year yet, but we're still considering the feedback that we've received. And as soon as we have updates, we'll be sharing them with families in schools and elected officials.
Thank you. Will GNT tests be given? Will the GNT test be given this year?
Same answer. I do not have information on the administration of it for this year yet, but we hope to have more to share soon as school reopening is in full. It's until we fully launched all of our school reopening plans.
Thank you. As soon as that information is out, can you please let the borough president know? That way we can share it with the parents.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been getting a lot of inquiries about it. We understand that, everyone is very eager for more information. So we'll be sure to share it with your team.
Thank you.
I have a question for the students that are doing remote learning. How are they being assessed? How are they taking tests for their classes if they're full remote?
So formative assessments are done on a daily basis, whether it's live instruction or remote. Teachers are throughout their lessons, whether it's a math lesson, ELA lesson, science or social studies, they're assessing children ongoing. An actual test itself, school just opened. I'm sure they haven't assessed in that way, but formatively, they're assessing on an ongoing basis. And that's why teachers sometimes place children in small groups to work with specific children on a specific area, because they've noticed that in this area we can amp up or remediate if necessary. Sometimes a teacher will meet one-on-one with a child, small groups, or give a specific assignment so that the children of that cohort review the specific work that the child has needs. So you may not see an assessment like a test per se, because school just started, but assessments, formative assessments are taking place constantly throughout the day through synchronous learning, and small group and individual one-on-one time.
Thank you for that answer. I know we talked about this, I think for District 28, if I'm correct. But this parent, Jean, would like to know if the diversity plan is back on the table.
It's on pause.
It's on pause. Okay. Thank you. I remember last year, DOE used to have the where parents can kids can call for help with homework. I see some parents are posting the UFT dial a teacher. Is that still functioning this year?
Dial a teacher has been going on since I was a child, so I'm going to say that yes, it is still going on. We can confirm with UFT if they're up and running just yet, but they were very much so helpful during the spring, and UFT as our union partners, I'm clear that they will continue. So Dial a Teacher should be still up and going for this for this school year, as they always are.
Thank you. There's a parent here who has a child and attends high school. He is doing the blended. However, the day that he is in school, he is sitting in his classroom doing his classwork from the remote learning teacher. How can he get more in-person learning? So he's in a classroom and he's just doing remote learning from his classroom instead of home.
So high school starts tomorrow. Is a child in D75 maybe?
They didn't specify that.
Because high school starts tomorrow. So I'm trying to understand how that.
The question clearly says my child high school only is offering remote learning. The hybrid model is to go once a week, but logging into the remote classes from the classroom while the teacher is in the classroom teaching her remote class. This is very distracting and it's just remote learning from a location other than home. So maybe it's a District 75 student.
Okay, so so sometimes we have if it's an ICT class, you may have one teacher in person, one teacher doing remote work. I'm trying to understand the scenario.
Well, if this parent is still here and they can email Monica, maybe if you want to put your email in the chat so we can get more information and maybe try to help this parent.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. So what is the status on gifted and talented programs? Why hasn't the G&T testing contract with Pearson been renewed? Families need adequate time to prepare for the exam dates.
So as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any updates on this issue right now. I can't speak to contract issues. I actually think there's a PEP meeting right now, which is where this contract would normally come up. But I can say that, we have to consider the safety and health guidelines for G&T testing, and all those plans are currently still in the works. But when we have updates, we'll share information back with families in the Queensborough President's office.
Great. Thank you. I see it's 7:57 p.m. We still have a few more questions on here. I don't know if you guys have room for maybe 2 more questions.
Yeah, please. We're here.
Okay. All right. Is it reasonable to push out the high school admissions deadlines by 2 or 3 months this year?
I think that's definitely, normally an application is due at the beginning of December for both of those processes. I think that's definitely something that's being considered, but we don't have any updates on that. If you would like to share your thoughts on that, you can definitely email us at enrollmentfeedback@schools.nyc.gov. I will also put that in the chat, and that's a great way to make sure that we hear some of your perspectives on what would be best for you and for schools as we kick off this, brand new school year.
Okay, let's see.
Where can parents go for, they need extra helps, especially with children with IEPs? What kind of support is being offered to parents with remote learning?
Parental support in regards from the school end or from the central end? I'm just trying to-
From the school end, it looks like just so that the child gets all the support that he needs to get his or her work done.
I mean, so that's definitely communication with the principal, the school leadership team, the PTA, school psychologist, school social worker. I mean, these, regardless as if, and I know some of these members I may have mentioned have remote accommodations, but parents definitely have access to those entities still. It may look a little different in terms of where you access them, whether in person or online, but it's also about being in communication with your school community so that you can make sure that things are being met. If the IEP is not being followed, as I said earlier, I cannot stress it enough, parents, if you have a child with an IEP, the IEP still stands. The IEP still stands. And because the IEP still stands, you get to have that conversation with the psychologist, with the principal to make sure that things are at play. If the school is not able to necessarily address within, because it's a staffing issue or so forth, the IEP still stands, and we could find other means by which, whether it's an RSA or something of that nature, but we want to make sure that whatever the IEP is designating, the child is receiving within the school community, and we don't get to not do it because we're in a pandemic. So whatever, sir, I would start with the school community first, but that's usually by the time it escalates to Mabel and my end, it's gone terribly awry. But as a former principal, I would encourage you to give the principal a chance first and speak to them about what the needs are and to see what's happening within the school community first, to see what's available. And then from there, you could decide if that meets your needs or not.
Okay, and there was again another question, and I know we addressed this before, but the lack of devices. If someone still does not have a device and has done everything that she's been told to do and still no device, what are their next steps?
Sorry, my kids are, it's 8 o'clock in my house. My kids are noisy. So I personally, from at this point, if that's the case, on a case-by-case basis, I would say just reach out to us at this point. If you've tried everything, you're written in the sky and you're still not getting the service, at least we could have you, we can make sure that you're in line to receive one. I mean, we can't give what we don't have at this point. It's a known issue and it's being addressed. So the best that I could do at this point is to make sure that your query is they're aware of your query. And that way, when the devices come in, you would get one. And if it's holding up remote learning in some way, shape, or form, I mean, we just got to, closed mouths don't get fed. So you just got to keep on asking until you get it. And if you're not getting it, just reach out and I'll see what I can, if it's my end or Mabel's end, we'll see what we can do. But there is a shortage at this moment with the iPads, and it's being worked on.
Do we know if what the shortage is here in Queens? Do we have an?
No, I don't have that data available. Mabel, I don't know if you have that data. You're on mute, Mabel.
Hey, I think Mabel is having some technical difficulties.
My apologies. My screen went black and I could hear everything and couldn't speak. So I do not know the amount of devices that we're short. However, we're doing everything possible to get a device in the hands of every child.
Thank you. So just one last question, because we know, and we appreciate your time. My school has not reached out regarding 504 accommodations. When will this start?
Like, a part of it, I'm sure, is we don't know what's going on with state testing just yet. Once we're clear on what the testing pieces are going to be for the year, I'm sure that will become more prevalent and obvious. So just sit tight on that. That information should be coming soon, hopefully, because as we're heading into October, and I'm sure that's probably the reason why. And then the other side of it is with the 504, if you need to have a revised one, or if it's expired in some way or it doesn't stand, you can always talk to their child's principal about that. However, again, because the state testing piece is not quite solidified just yet, I'm sure that's why it's not on schools' radars right now. The best advice I can give you is what I've been giving myself. Is like, I am anticipating this first day, and where reopening is no longer the conversation, so that we can say, this is what school is about and this is how we're going to do it. So things like 504s, things like related services, things like district planning will come. And I'm sure enrollment, Nadia, is going to go from being like, I don't know, to I know a whole bunch of stuff, because our biggest focus has really truly been lifting reopening in the safest, healthiest way. And I'm proud to report that with the first 2 days, things went very smooth. And I cannot thank the superintendents, my colleague across the table, Mabel. It was a very smooth first 2 days, and we're anticipating that tomorrow offers the same thing. And parents, thank you for your support on that. And just know that once we're clear on this piece, the normalcy that we once knew, we're going to start rolling those pieces into play. So the questions around enrollment, the questions around district planning, the questions around the diversity plan, I mean, those things are going to come into play much more heavily as we head towards mid to late October, because grading policies, those things, because we will have solidified and ensured this health and safety first. So thanks again for all that you have done as parents to support us within this effort, and know that we are working on your behalf. But if there's any questions that were not answered, again, I'm districts 27, 28, 29, and all the high schools. And my email address is mdegovi@schools.nyc.gov. That's MDEGOVI. It's my last name without the A, at nycschools.gov. And Mabel, you want to give some closing remarks?
Sure. I want to thank the borough president, President Lee, her support team, the parents who come faithfully monthly to these meetings to get information. I want to thank you for working with us in partnership. I know that we answered some questions, and some questions, like my colleague said, will be up front and center this coming month and continuous throughout, the fall semester. But we thank you for allowing us to reopen in a safe manner for pre-K, 3K, and elementary schools, and our K-8 schools, and tomorrow our middle schools and high schools, so that all our children get that opportunity of opening day with their new sneakers and their new backpacks and their excitement of a new school year in a safe manner. We will continue to be part of the borough president's family in a sense of coming back when you invite us, and we will continue to answer your questions as needed. Again, my districts are 24, 5, 6, 30, and the high schools. And I put my email and phone number on the chat, but it's M-Sarduy, S like in Sam, A-R-D like in David, U-Y like yellow, at schools.nyc.gov. And we are here to serve you. So thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to close out the meeting, and I want to thank everybody for attending. On behalf of the Queensborough President, Sharon Lee, I would like to thank Dr. de Govia, Ms. Muniz-Sarduy and Nadiya, Chadha, and all the parents who attended this evening. I just want to remind everybody about the census if you haven't filled it out. And the reason why we stress it so much is because we really need the funding here in Queens for, you know, more schools, more, you know, so they have money to fix the roads, and that's very important. And we get that money from the federal government. You know, and the census is every 10 years. So we need to get as many people counted. If you haven't filled out the census, you can go to 2020census.gov, and the deadline is October 31st if you haven't filled it out yet. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you very much for attending. 60 questions were answered. 10 were still pending. We can follow up with those questions via email. I just want to share my email in case anybody has any questions. My direct email is M as in Mary, GUTIERREZ@queensbp.org. Or to make it easier, you can email education@queensbp.org. And I will put it here on the chat. Okay, so it's there now. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Have a good night, everybody. Be well and be safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.